Welcome to the Ice House. We're delighted to have you here. We're absolutely delighted to have 5 climate activists for you here. They're each going to give a statement, just in this order. I'm going to announce their names. Afterwards, we're going to have time for questions. And just so you know, when you address your question, you're addressing it to the entire group, and they're going to decide who will take the question. So, really pleased to introduce in this order, Isabel Axelson, Lucina Till, Vanessa Nakate, Greta Thunberg, Luisa Neubauer. Off to you.
We have noticed that throughout the WIF annual meeting that the general focus has not been on finding actual solutions and mitigating the climate crisis, but rather on developing technologies. We cannot rely on technologies that do not yet exist. We must use what we already have. Ceasing the behavior that is causing the emissions is crucial.
However, it can only happen if the facts are taken into account. We got the feeling that WEF was closed in a bubble of positivity away from reality. But we are in a crisis. And for as long as we refuse to pop the bubble, we will live in lies and not change the fate of humanity.
We need to look at climate justice from every perspective because we all have a story to tell. I'm camping with the Arctic Base Camp and we've been sleeping out in tents. This is to show you that we've left our comfort zones. There is someone from Brazil, someone from China, someone from UK, we have someone from Greenland. We've left our comfort zones to show you that it is time for all of you to leave your comfort zones because it is the uncomfortable things that we'll do that will be able to save the planet. If it's uncomfortable for us to give up the fossil fuels, that will be what will save our planet. You have seen and ignored sufferings of different kinds of people. You've chosen the things to report. But it is time to report stories from every part of the world because people are suffering from every corner of the world. Thank you.
And we must remember that as long as we do not treat this crisis as a crisis, and as long as the facts and the science are being left completely ignored, then we will not be able to solve this crisis. We need to understand the urgency of the situation, and we need to see this from a holistic point of view. And before we came here, we had a few demands for this WEF. And of course, those demands have been completely ignored, but we expected nothing less. Because as I said, as long as the science is being ignored, as long as the facts are not being taken into account, and as long as the situation is not being treated as a crisis, then world and business leaders can, of course, continue to ignore the situation, and that they don't have to do anything because they are not being held accountable.
So what needs to happen next? We noticed that at the WEF there seems a general optimism about the situation and about an obvious discourse change, which is nice. As we hear, this is the first time the WEF has been focusing on the climate in such intensity. This is of course good, but we never striked for discourse change. From the first day onwards, we striked for actual climate action. So here at the WEF, we see and hear a lot of nice words and a lot of big speeches. And we expect throughout the next days and weeks and months, every single of those ones to be actually turned into action. And we will hold each of those speakers accountable. We will watch them and we will ask them to turn their words into action. At the WEF, there are some of the wealthiest and most fortunate companies, investment funds, and individuals assembled on the planet. And it is their money that is fueling this crisis. It is their money that is allowing this crisis to go on and to reach the standards of today. So throughout the year 2020, there needs to be a loud and large shift of all that money away from fossil fuels. This is our only chance to reach the Paris Agreement, to stick to 1.5 degrees, and to make sure that this catastrophe isn't turning into something that we can't even imagine yet. This is one of the many crucial tasks for this year. We are not talking of the far future, we are not talking of 2030, but we're talking of today. Because as the IPCC states very clearly, 2020 is the year, the only year we have left to make sure that we won't cross a 1.5 degree warming target. This is the year this needs to happen, and we intend to demand that urgent action, that needed action throughout this year, as it's the last one for 1.5 that we have according to the IPCC.
Just to add, of course, this is not the last year we have.
For one, yes. Yeah. It's not the last year for climate action. Please don't write that down. It's we need climate action all the time. It's just the pathways that we are taking right now are deciding about where we can get in the future.
So we're going to have 2 microphones roaming. And there's a question here, and then just next to you.
And before we answer questions, I'm just going to say that Vanessa and I have the flu, so you will have to excuse our low energy level.
Thank you. Kathy Newman, Channel 4 News. Greta, I wondered how it felt to be publicly insulted by the American president and the US Treasury Secretary. What effect does that have on you?
Of course, no effect. We are being criticized like that all the time, and of course, if we would care about that, then we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
It's water off a duck's back.
I'm sorry?
It's water off a duck's back. It goes straight over your head.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we cannot care about those kinds of things if we have put ourselves in this spotlight, and then we know that, as we said, people do not understand the situation. I mean, the situation is not being treated as the crisis it is, and then of course people will criticize us because we are the ones who are telling this, and basically no one else is telling this. So that's what, of course, we will receive these kinds of things. I mean, it's horrible, but what do you others think about that?
We know that the task that lies in front of us is quite big. So I think it's in all of our interest to focus on the things that we need to get done and leave disturbing parts to the side, as we really don't have time or energy or capacity to lose.
Russell Lynch from the Daily Telegraph. Greta, given that you said that your demands were completely ignored this week, do you think Davos is actually worth it from the carbon expended to get world leaders here?
Before I answer that question, I just want to encourage everyone to not only ask questions to me. I mean, we are not in a position to say whether Davos is good or bad from that perspective. I mean, we just took this opportunity to go here because this is where many world and business leaders are gathered, and we are not in a position to say such a thing.
I think that for Davos, it gave us an opportunity to talk about the things that we need and the climate action that we need. The only issue with it is that we keep getting more words and promises and not actions. Yeah.
I agree.
Greta, my name is Vishnu Shom. I'm with New Delhi Television, India. We are a country of more than 1 billion, and yet climate change is not a political issue in India for any party. It doesn't decide elections. What is your message to various governments in India and the government of India on the importance of climate change for a country with a population of more than 1 billion?
Of course, my message to India is the same as to every other country, as I don't focus on the specific countries. I haven't done before. Just that we need to listen to the science, and we need to treat this crisis like the crisis it is. And I'm gonna hand over the mic to the others because I've already spoken so much, and I think the others should also have a chance to say something.
I think that answer said all of it.
Okay, just here.
Thank you very much. John Defterios with CNN, and this is a question for Greta because it came up during the roundtable I was chairing yesterday. We have a position now that's been declared to get out of fossil fuels. You have a U.S. president who suggests that this is all speculation and alarmist. How do you find the center where we're actually reducing carbon emissions and find compromise?
I mean, can I hand over that question? Because
I'd love to have you address it because it came up during the roundtable. So it's great that you've identified an opportunity here to get the world's attention. And you have a U.S. president that's not part of the Paris Agreement. How do you take this Davos community and advance it where we see carbon reduction, carbon emissions rose in 2019? So how do we actually go to solutions at this stage? Thanks.
I think anyone can answer that question.
Yeah,
You've
I
spoken
think so.
enough. I think, you want the other folks to have a word.
I don't think it should be that difficult to overgo to solutions. At the moment, we are just speaking. I think as soon as the politicians actually listen to what the science is saying and discuss things within themselves and actually take action, write it down on paper and do it, that's all is needed, really.
Hi, my question is to Lucina. Hi. We briefly met last year in Lausanne, and you co-organized the SMILE Summit. And I was just wondering, the next SMILE Summit will be held in Turin, right? And I'm just wondering, when will it be held, and what will your role in it? What will be your role?
The dates are not fixed yet, so it's still being worked out. I will be a normal participant, and I don't know yet if I will be going, because I also want to give the chance to other people from Switzerland to go. I will, of course, help the people organizing if I can give some tips to how to deal with those situations. But I don't have a special role there.
So, Mini Sengupta from the New York Times. Anyone can answer this question. You spoke of holding people accountable over the course of this year. Can you say how you plan to do that, and what exactly do you want them to do? And on what target and what timetable?
Of course, I can, in this instance, not speak for everyone and every climate activist for Fridays for Future worldwide. Maybe coming from a German perspective, where we had a very eventful time recently with Siemens, who is building infrastructure for the Adani mine in Australia. And in this context, for instance, we very directly addressed Siemens and their CEO, Joe Kaeser, asking to drop this contract and to not cooperate with the Adani mine project. As we know, if Adani opens as planned, the 2-degree target is in severe danger. So there is no way that all this coal can be mined. I had discussions with Joe Kaeser. We were protesting in front of Siemens company locations across the country in Germany, and we plan to speak at the AGM of Siemens in Munich in February. And I believe the fact that Joe Kaiser and us met and that actually there has been a discussion on the involvement of Siemens in the Adani mine kind of speaks for the fact that at least there was some pressure built up on Siemens. And obviously we won't give up on that.
Lucy White from the Daily Mail. Thank you all for speaking. And it strikes me that a lot of the people behind this event and a lot of people who are participating in this event are wealthy, powerful men. Why do you think it is that it is taking a young panel like yourself to actually get them to listen to these problems? And do you also think that you actually are being listened to, or do you think that they're sort of seeing you as a novelty that is good to listen to, but they're not actually going to take in anything that you say?
One thing I'm sure of is that they are listening to us, they listen to us, but they either choose to ignore or to do something about the demands that we are requesting for. And for the business leaders and the people in power, they have the authority and all the guts to save us from this planet. So we've done all we've had to do, but it's all up to them. But one thing I'm sure of is that they're listening to us. If they don't act, it's because they're ignoring it. Yeah.
Yes, Guy Rolnick from The Marker. Do you think after you visited Davos here in the last few days that actually business people are the wrong audience and we shouldn't wait for them to do anything voluntarily, and the real audience is only the politicians, perhaps captured by those business people?
Of course, this is the right audience. Everyone is the right audience since I mean, both the finance, the business sector, and the political sector. Of course, everyone needs to do something. So everyone is the right audience. We shouldn't be focusing about which sector is most responsible, which sector has to do most, because we need to push from every direction, and this change needs to come from every direction. Yeah.
And maybe to add to that, as Greenpeace has recently, this week actually published, since the Paris Agreement was signed, there was far more than $1 trillion invested in new fossil-free projects. So obviously there needs to be changes within the money flows, within the ways that projects are insured, the way that companies invest or divest. So as we address everyone, I think Davos is a good place to come as a climate activist.
Mandeep Rai from the Values Compass. I think it's great that you're here and representing. I think it's really interesting that you're all female. I do think that we're talking about a long-term solution and a long-term problem, and politicians are generally only looking at the short term and getting elected again. So given that's the case, how can we help you? How can we also, men and others, get a position at the table so that we can support you? What would you like?
I think the media needs to start reporting about the crisis and the climate more than they are reporting about us as people. At the moment, there is an insane focus on climate activists and on people, and they are not speaking about carbon budgets. They are not speaking about the facts. The media really needs to start reporting what is needed to be done, not only sensational headlines.
And also, if I can just add to that, report about the very facts. And when people will see the very facts, they will more focus on the long term and see that short term, what they want to do on the short term maybe needs to be put in a different perspective compared to what will happen in the long term, I guess.
Where I come from in Uganda, that's in Africa, most people believe what they watch on the media. So it's really helpful if you try and report the disasters that happen as a result of the climate crisis, and try as much as possible to relate them to climate change, because it is really hard educating an entire country or an entire continent by ourselves as activists. So media reaches are wider, and so with that you can help us try to report the crisis and the solutions that we offer. Yeah.
Hadass Gold, also with CNN. I'm sure this week you've met with a lot of interesting and powerful people. Could you by chance name names and tell us who you've met with, what they may have promised to you, and if what they have talked to you about? It would be very interesting to hear, because a lot of people here have been enamored, as you said, by you as people. So maybe it would be helpful for all of us to know who you've talked to and what they've said to you, and that will help hold them to account.
We don't want to focus on individuals. I mean, everybody has a responsibility to solve the climate crisis, and some people of course have more responsibility than others, but we don't want to point out at individuals. Of course we have met many people that have a lot of responsibility resting on their shoulders, but we don't see it as our place to point them out.
Excuse me, did you, just so we can have a guidance, any hydrocarbon producers, oil, gas producers, and were they receptive to your message? Any of the five of you get a chance to actually meet with any of the energy leaders here at Davos? Were they receptive to your messages that urgent action is needed?
I think they answered the question.
I had a meeting with Joe Kaiser. That's not an energy producer, though. It's of course, as you know.
He is an energy producer. But is there, I think we're trying to find out, did you have any other meetings with the energy leaders who actually control the investments? We can find out if they're receptive to your message.
Well, maybe so much on that. I don't think there has been a lack on reporting about the fact that Greta and other climate activists are at Davos, and on the reporting side. And I am pretty confident that those energy leaders here at Davos are well aware that there are climate activists like us who pound out at the science. And in their position, they surely have access to the best available science, just like many others do. And I'm optimistic that if they wanted to, they could inform themselves about the science there is and about the action that needs to be taken.
Hi, this question is for everyone. Can you talk a little bit about how social media has affected this movement, and do you think that it's helping the cause here?
Personally, it has been helpful for me because of social media, my activism has been able to spread across Uganda and Africa and impacted some people to join the climate activism. So it has been good for me.
It definitely helped to spread the word.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I think Fridays for Future and the climate strike movement has become so big is because we have access to control our own media and to control how we get our voices out in a way that future generations have not. So I think it has been a very important tool in how we have mobilized.
We have 2 minutes left. One question here.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here and for your speaking about... I'm Lynette Walworth. I'm an artist from Australia. Yeah.
Do you have a question?
I have a question. I wonder if you can speak to the loss of 1 billion animals in these most recent fires in Australia and the message around present over future thinking in terms of climate.
About that, it is really sad that we've lost billions of animals, especially in the Australian fires. But it's also important to note that in Africa, we've really had crazy floods as a result of extreme weather conditions, and these have killed millions of animals as well. It's just that media is kind of biased, so you choose what to report. So it's really sad that we've lost millions of animals from various parts of the world, but not just animals, even people are dying. So we really need to do something to stop this. It's a massacre.
maybe the one lesson from those fires across the globe, not just Australia, but African countries, South America. There's one lesson, and it's really about don't wait for the apocalypse to come. People often say, well, when the crisis emerges, when it's right in front of our doorstep, then we will act. Well, you look around and the crisis is there. Our house is literally on fire, and what we see are continued investments in fossil fuels, continued leaders who ignore the facts. We see climate ignorance going on. We see maybe less climate denial, but we see more climate action denial. I think this should, really be a warning for us that despite all the losses, there has never been a point in waiting for the crisis to actually come up, because it is here now, and it is our job, and especially a job of media, to wake up to this and to pre-report on that.
Last question just here.
Benedikt von Imhoff, German press agency, DPA. You were mentioning Mr. Kayser already, and now he has claimed that you're refusing a cooperation, and the more you refuse yourself, you would forfeit your moral claim to criticize. What would you answer him, Ms. Neubauer, or any other, of course? Thank you.
You mean about the seat on the board of Siemens?
Well, in total, yes. He was claiming that you just maybe also the seat on the board and every other thing, that you would only be criticizing but not cooperating.
I feel as a climate activist who fights for a future and for the Paris Agreement, it is part of the job description to hold people like Joe Kayser and many others, not just him, accountable. His job would be to act responsibly, as responsible as he can. He knows that. We had a very good discussion here at Davos, so I think the dialogue is still going on, and will continue. At the same time, we urge all investors or companies that are currently responsible for making fossil fuel projects happening to realize what their responsibility is right now. And our message to Joe Kayser is the same as to all other CEOs and investors in those projects. If you add up all the contracts that have been signed by today on fossil fuel projects, we will be far beyond 2 degrees. So some of those contracts, if not all of them, they will have to be cancelled if we want to actually do something about Paris. This is not a radical demand, this is a rational demand. This is what he knows by now, and I'm sure he tells his colleagues.
Thank you very much. I think that's all for now. That's all for now, but there'll be more chance for you to ask questions down at Postplatz. Okay? No, that's it. We're gonna let them leave and get ready for the march. Okay?